Okay, so welcome everyone. My name is Klaudia Klimek, and I'm the Vice President of the Social Cultural Association of Jews in Poland. And now we are taking part in one of its projects, which is the name is Voice of Polish-Jews in Europe. The project is held together with European Jewish Association and is a public task financed by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Poland within the grant competition Public Diplomacy 2021. Today, my guests are Monika Krawczyk, Director of the Jewish Historical Institute in Poland, and Ethan Bergman, Youth Development and Creative Projects Officer from the European Jewish Association. Hello, welcome everyone, and thank you very much for wanting to take part in this discussion. Discussion is, I think, very challenging. It's about the contemporary Polish-Jewish relations in terms of the restitution law, as well as the diplomatic, if I can say so, diplomatic conflict between two states and the ambassadors. For our viewers, I would like just to briefly say about the restitution, about the last act. So although less recognized by the Polish media, a much more serious game now is being played in the shadow of the diplomatic conflict over the Lex TVN. At stake is both the restitution of the Jewish property in Poland, lost during and after the World War II by its rightful owners, and compensation related to hairless property for which no hairs can be identified. And according to the amendment, the Code of the Administrative Procedure passed by the Sejm in June and adopted by the Senate with 3 amendments on 23rd July, it will not be possible to institute proceedings to challenge an administrative decision more than 30 years after its issuance. Proceedings already pending are to be completed, and the vacation legis of the law has been extended to 3 months. But as far as I know, it was signed by the president already, Duda. Am I right? So today I would like you to, first of all, Monika, because you have a huge experience and knowledge, and also you are from Poland, so you know how it works, to tell us more about just the people to understand, and Jews all over the Europe to understand what it is about this restitution law. And then Ethan, who is working in Brussels in the European Jewish Association, but as well you're writing the articles to the, for example, the Times of Israel, and I know that you're writing the article about this topic as well. I would like to tell us more how it looks like from the perspective of the European Jewry, how it's perceived, how that situation is described. So first, I'm giving the voice to Monika Krawczyk. Please explain us in simple words, what is this restitution law, and should we be worried as a European Jewry or not?
Okay, thank you very much. It's indeed very, very deep and I would say complicated subject as far as it goes actually to the end of the war and situation of the properties in Poland that they were at in 1945 when Poland became liberated from occupying German forces and German administration. And we know that in the time during the war, the properties were generally treated by German occupying forces and its administration as well, military gain and gain for the economy of the Third Reich. And especially the Jewish properties were taken by the Germans, and they were. We need Eva, I think, to. Oh, thank you. To mute. And I think that everyone else, we would like to mute unless you're not speaking. That would be helpful. Thank you so much. The properties owned by the Jews were especially targeted by the German administration because they were subject to the relevant of Nuremberg laws, which were simply expropriating or trying to. The word is used to be Aryanized, which meant their ownership or not necessarily ownership, but possession and administration of those properties should be handled by the Aryans, which in large part were the German appointed administrators. And in 1945, the Polish government, which regained its control over the territory, passed a legislation saying that the rightful owners are allowed to get back their properties immediately. And only if they don't come and claim, because of course everybody was aware of the tremendous loss, especially among the Jewish population, but it also could be the situation with many Polish owners who lost the possession of their properties. Unless they should not come back and claim, the properties would be taken over by the state in the next 10 years, counting from 1945. But in 1947 and 48, Polish status of the constitution changed from, let's say, democratic country to a communist-controlled state, which policy was that the properties should be owned by the state because it was not in line with communist doctrine to have private properties. So basically, even though those legislation were never revoked, we started to deal, the communist government started to deal with series of new legislations, determining that some sections of the industry of other types of real estate should be nationalized. And this is, with this status, we get back to, or it carries over until 1989, when the Iron Curtain breaks down, and we are now in fully democratic state and the rule of law, and the constitution, which is upholding private property as one of the basic human rights and element of the democratic system, which should be followed. But the situation is as it is, with entering the new democratic era, with unregulated status of many properties that are either owned and registered on the name of state treasury, or they are registered still on the names of previous owners who may be or may not be alive. So that causes a series of additional problems that are connected with establishment of the correct successors and correct solution for large parts of properties and that are present in many sections of the economy, because we are not only talking about residential houses, but we are talking about factories, about forest, about pharmacies, about other types of properties that were nationalized during the communist rule. And Poland started to prepare for the legislation that would address the claims or the needs of and the rights of former owners. And this is concerning both Polish and Jewish owners. We do not differentiate at this point because all of them were expropriated by either occupant, which was the Nazi Germany, or by communist Polish state. And this was concerning both Poles and Jews and Polish citizens as such.
But I have a question, because I think that during the communism time, I'm not sure, was it in 56, the communists had an agreement with the American government, and I think that $40 million already were paid to the American state, who was supposed to give those money to Jews that survived the Holocaust, went to United States, where, as you said, for example, owners of some factories or bigger properties, and that was supposed to be like a way to reparate. Can we assume that this case is over because we already gave those money to the US government, or it's not the same?
Yes and no, because this adds additional complication. Of course, we are talking in the 1960s, when Poland was trying very eagerly to re-establish and normalize the foreign relations with especially the Western countries. And the Western countries, including United States, and this is like most important element here, but also very important other countries, Great Britain, which held also quite large Polish population, which was not allowed to come back to Poland after the Second World War. We are talking about the soldiers, for example, who were fighting alongside with the Allies, and some other countries as well. Those countries said to Polish diplomatic forces, "Hey, we can talk about normalization and reestablishing of proper relations, but you need to compensate our citizens, our American or our British citizens, who were not able to get back their real estates that were taken over by the states, by the Polish state, or previously somehow it was not returned to them." And in that case, at least in the United States, there was a special commission dealt by the state secretary office, the foreign office in England, to where those who felt, I mean, and still we are talking only about the American citizens at that time, who came forward and indicated that they owned some properties, and then Poland indeed paid to those specific claims. But there were different problems on that level, because some of the claimants didn't know precisely where, how to identify the properties, because they are identified in Poland by the entry in the so-called perpetual books, which are maintained for most of the cities. And then we go back another 100 years before, and some sections of Poland didn't have this system very well developed, and we are talking about 3 different countries that were establishing those property registration systems during the partition. So we were dealing with the administrative system of Russia, Germany, and Austria. And so we were talking about 3 different languages and 3 different systems, and the numbers didn't match, and the streets changed names. So basically, some people did got some compensation, which could be viewed as symbolic. But in terms of the 60s prices and values, I think that the claimants did think that they received fair compensation to what they could expect. So those cases are considered today by the administrative and legislative and court systems as being fully covered and paid. But this does not touch the issue of many people who were not at the time citizens of United States or England or other countries with whom Poland had these bilateral treaties specifically addressing this cause.
Okay, so we will get back to the discussion, like in details, like should it be, should it not be? But first, I want to also ask Ethan on this stage of our discussion. Like you already heard what Monika is saying and how she's describing as also Polish person who's here living and listening to what is happening in media and what the politicians are saying. How this situation is described in foreign Jewish media, American or Israeli one? How do you see the situation?
Okay, so first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm very interested in this discussion and feel like I can contribute a bit by the perceptions that are actually taking place and are transferred onto Poland. So first of all, I would like to describe the situation, at least of how we everyday Jewish citizens in Europe see it. And then I can describe other types of media and other outreaches. So first of all, when the news was made public about the restitution law, I feel like in Europe, we saw this as a direct continuation of rising anti-Semitism. Not a lot of people were informed about this law in the first place, but it felt very symbolic. And I think that is why we cared so much about it. We just saw it as, you know, all the things that we hear about Poland turning a bit more extreme, having a bit more of a democratic backsliding. We saw that as a continuation of that. Also as a continuation of the 2018 law, which was put into place, which basically banned or made it illegal to refer to Polish death camps, and basically collectively holding Poland or Polish people responsible for the Holocaust. So it felt like a lot of history was being washed away. And especially in Europe or in Western Europe, so anywhere above France, the vast majority of the Jewish population has Eastern European origins, myself included, from Poland. So it really did feel like an insult in a sense, something that didn't make much sense as well due to the timing. This felt very inappropriate and felt as a political move as well, made to make the ruling party more popular in a sense. So that was how it was perceived at first. Now, of course, as I said, like we were a bit more confused, at least the people that I've talked to and the people in the Jewish organizations that I've known have been very confused about the utility of this law at first. So yeah, we saw this as part of just another expansion of anti-Semitism as a whole. And a lot of references were made towards Polish people being a bit more anti-Semitic in general. So there was indeed more of a sentiment of Polish anti-Semitism never having been going away. And people were really referring to, or like really trying to raise this point by saying that even after World War II, that there were pogroms committed by Polish people. For example, the Kielce pogrom in 1946 or 47. So those things were kind of like brought back into history. Those things were brought back into the narrative to kind of like say that Poland has not changed and is actually something that we should fear as a whole. That yes, they are close to our allies, our plan B, would you say Israel? But even that nowadays has been going backwards. So we are really alienated as European Jews, what's been going on. And especially the biggest insult coming out of this whole diplomatic mess is the fact that possible programs of going to visiting places like Auschwitz, for example, for Israeli school children has been, the discussion about that has been altered. And the foreign minister has basically said that we might have to alter this or it's not done in the exact correct way. So all of these elements combined have created this very anti-Poland sentiment, at least right now in the European Jewish community. And yeah, we are just very scared about the future of the country and the remaining Jewish population there. So a lot of the European Jewish voices and European Jewish outlets have in a way spoken for the Jewish community in Poland that's remaining, saying like they are being really threatened right now, being accused of dual loyalty and so forth. So these are all elements that are kind of found throughout European Jewish media. Now, addressing Israeli media is a whole other different subject, because it basically depends on the political stance of the newspaper, whether it be Haaretz, Jerusalem Post, or the Times of Israel. So let me first start by saying how it was described in the Times of Israel. Now, I would say that of all the newspapers that I've analyzed out of Israel, the Times of Israel was the most central in its views, basically not expanding too much on the way that it was perceived in Poland, this restitution law. There were a few comments being made by people from TSKZ, but generally, the majority of the content that was being written about was about exact diplomatic language which was being exchanged between President Duda and the foreign minister Yair Lapid. And a lot of information was also given about Lapid and why precisely the foreign minister of Israel, Yair Lapid, has decided to take such a big stance over this. Because political experts about Poland-Israel relations have stated quite a number of times that Lapid has destroyed decades of work, decades of partnership by calling this law directly anti-Semitic, saying that the country has decided not to honor tragedy, that it's anti-democratic, non-liberal, and so forth. So the majority of the rest of the articles were basically focusing on Yair Lapid directly, and what his relationship or what his commitment to this deal is, which is more of a political game and also emotional on the same side. Political, it gives quite a lot of power for a foreign minister to basically take a stand for what is correct, for what in the sense for Israeli citizens is justice. But on the emotional side, he has said a number of times, including in 2014 at a remembrance events, saying that his father is the definition of the Holocaust. The Holocaust is his father, and his father is him. So it means it means a lot to him, basically remembering the Holocaust and doing it in a fair, respectable way. So in regards to the restitution law, this was deemed as kind of like a Holocaust denial or revisionism, basically saying that not a lot of people, were either informed or were attached to this event. And basically when the restitution law came into place, this was directly seen by Yair Lapid as Poland trying to explain that there aren't that many Jews left, or that they haven't really found their presence, and therefore the law is kind of the law of restitution in the first place is kind of seen as useless. So it felt as a direct continuation of 2018 as well for Yair Lapid in terms of the whole fact about making it illegal to call it Polish death camps. So it was more of a psychological analysis that was being made in the Times of Israel as a whole. In regards to other publications, for example, Haaretz was also more or less just stating the facts and not going too far into history. But the most interesting that I found was the Jerusalem Post, which also explained Poland's reasoning for why exactly this restitution law came into being. There was also political motivations of both actors being explained, or both states being explained. And they were even being a bit more optimistic, which isn't often seen in Israeli media in regards to foreign relations, including when you put the anti-Semitism label on there. So they were being a bit more optimistic and talking about possible solutions rather than the eventual doom of these relations. Also explaining the very, very concrete allyship and partnership that has been established between Israel and Poland over the years, including basically defending Israel sometimes in the European Union alongside Hungary. Now, this is at stake, which also is a big fear for European Jews and also Israelis. It was also explained in all of these three publications that the diplomatic representation was also being taken away, by basically saying that the ambassadors of both countries had been removed or been recalled back. And that is basically the last we hear of that in the media. There hasn't been any more publications or any more news regarding what the state is of, ambassador connections anymore. Mm-hmm. The whole reason for one more thing. The whole reason for President Duda to have recalled the ambassador first before Israel doing the same thing is due to the fact that he thinks that in Israel now most people are very anti-Polish, and that he fears for the safety of the family of the ambassador. Now, of course, I can't say if there's any correctness or inaccuracies in that, but it is true that a lot of people in Israel do not see Poland as the great ally that it used to be, and a lot of them still resent it. So I don't know how they deal with the individuals on the ground on a day-to-day basis, but the country and the state of Poland has been very, very wrongly deemed in Israeli society recently, especially since there are so many people like me that are descendants from Holocaust survivors in Poland. So this feels like a slap in the face.
Got it. Okay, thank you. So I also have a question to you also, Monika. How do you see that? Because I have a feeling that the whole discussion is actually discussion between Polish state, Israelis, Americans. I want to just say that what was written in American news, that it's written that the compensation will help future of those who survived Holocaust and for whole Jewry to develop. Do we see that actually it's also the case of the European Jewry? Like, do we really have a position here in this whole discussion? Also, the president of the TSKZ, Social Cultural Association of Jews in Poland, Artur Hoffman, he said in the interviews that actually the discussion is not about the Polish Jewry. The Polish Jewry doesn't take a stand in this discussion. Why we don't, like, those are the American Jews who want this restitution law to not be passed. He said we don't care about that, we as a Polish Jews, because it doesn't give us anything additionally. Like, Monika, like, do we have a voice in this discussion as a Polish Jewry, or nobody asks us?
Well, that's thank you very much. You hit the nail right on. I didn't see and didn't actually receive much of inquiries on behalf of the say Jewish community or Jewish interest circles. What do we think about it? But maybe it's not really the main issue here, because if we look at least in 1989, when Poland became democratic countries, all the legal tools that were available at this time, even though this was also many legislative changes trying to revoke the effect of communist laws, but since that time, many thousands of Jewish people who were not able to pursue their claims until that time submitted their claims, and they went through the legal system as it was available without any special law, any special new restitution law, and received back their properties. So the real question is, how many people are affected now by this change in the code of the administrative procedures, which is basically stopping the ongoing restitution cases from the times immemorial. So this is the question that is of practical nature. If we want to really solve this issue, let's look at this from this perspective. Because honestly speaking, today we don't know how many, well, we are talking about the Jewish citizens or Jewish people from Europe, United States, Australia, wherever, who were affected by that law. But let's not forget that they are on the same in the same situation as Polish or native Polish or ethnic Polish citizens who were whose properties were also nationalized. So pretty much there is the talk about anti-Semitic nature of this rule is not justified at all, because it concerns at the same level, if not maybe on more level, if we look exactly who is claiming what and where on these situations. If I may comment on the issues of remembrance, let's look at this perspective that Poland is the governmental central state budget is maintaining a huge effort, and it's actually, in terms of finances, it should be appreciated how much is spent on maintenance of the museums that are dealing with martyrological issues and heritage and martyrdom sites from the Second World War. We are talking about, of course, the most significant museum of former German concentration camp in Auschwitz. But there are also other places like Majdanek, Treblinka, Grossrosen, Chełmno, other major sites, which, thanks to the Polish government, were actually transferred from their status was elevated to become the museums. So the sites are protected, and a lot of effort is spent on this memory, which is actually common denominator for both Polish and Jewish nationals who were victims of the Second World War and well, Holocaust on one hand, but also anti-Polish rules and regulations by Germans during the war. And my question is, and I don't know, maybe Ethan, you know, if Yair Lapid has actually ever visited Poland in terms of his remembrance roads or trials?
I am not certain, but I am pretty sure that he has, because the vast majority of Israeli Jews, at least Ashkenazi Jews, have been able to visit Poland. It is part of the national curriculum to go on the March to the Living trips, either in your last year of your high school or the year prior to that. And I imagine somebody with such a deep connection to the Holocaust, as I had explained before, would have definitely already been to Auschwitz. So I believe that he has.
But we don't know for sure.
Not sure, no.
I'm checking actually now in the internet, but
okay, but so if you are checking, I just want to say one more thing, that actually the interest between Poland and Israel is not only on the level of education and martyrology and Holocaust and history, but it is also on many other levels of today's economy and the international systems of European Union, of the United Nations, and other issues. So I'm hoping that this ties between Poland and Israel will be soon restarted and reestablished for the benefit of the only democracy that is present in the Middle East, which is Israel. And I really hope that some solutions could be discussed. But if we don't have ambassadors, then makes things more difficult.
Yeah, much more difficult. Ethan, how do you think about this Polish Jewish voices? Do you see them? Do you hear them in media that you watch, that you also produce?
Well, to be quite honest, I feel like, at least in Europe, where, as I said, the vast majority of Jews have some Polish roots and consider themselves Polish-Jewish to a certain extent as well. So we consider ourselves part of that
Oh.
There's so much care about that inside American media, of basically saying, like, look at my family's legacy, how Poland is spitting on it. So that's what I mean when it's more emotional and people don't really look at the facts of the restitution law. Also in the fact that it doesn't discriminate between Jews and non-Jews. So the whole notion of calling it blandly anti-Semitic is, now that I know more about it, is absolutely ludicrous in a sense. It does not make much sense, but still, the emotions sometimes are more powerful than fact, as we unfortunately know. It doesn't matter if it's about this subject or about the conflict or whatever. So I believe that in Europe, we also don't really hear too much about the Jews of Poland anymore. Fortunately, I am able, with my position and with my experience and the connections that I have, find a bit more about the Polish Jewry. But even when we go and visit Polish death camps, we don't really go and visit the present Jewish community. We actually go to an abandoned synagogue. We go to Auschwitz. We go to all these places. And I just realized I refer to it as Polish death camp. Let me reiterate. Exactly. I'm very sorry about that. I know that's not the correct way of saying it. But yeah, so whether it be Auschwitz or other places of the sorts. So we would do that kind of tour and we would not get the best image of Poland. I've only been to Poland as somebody with Polish Jewish origin, only to visit, I suppose, sites of slaughter, sites of death. You don't really hear too much about the Polish Jewish community. And when we talk about Eastern European Jewry as a whole, we really don't see anything more about them in the media or just in everyday Jewish life. It's mainly focused on one part. So a lot of us, I suppose, European Jews, or however you want to call it, even in the West, with some Polish Jewish ancestry, have decided to speak out against this without understanding that there's still a community that is being affected by this. Yeah. And now that I understand a bit more about it, I was also wondering, maybe you guys can help in answering this question, is in a sense, Poland's citizens are the most, are people that accuse them the most of their Jewish populations of being dual loyal, meaning that they're more loyal to the state of Israel rather than to their own country of Poland. And I was wondering, especially with this diplomatic scuffle that's been going on, if there have been any any consequences of it, because at least online I've seen Polish people say some type of anti-Semitic stuff in regards to this whole diplomatic scuffle. But have there been any repercussions for the Polish Jewish community?
Answering about, there's not a lot of like a voice of Polish Jews in European media. That's why we actually invented this project. This project was invented like the voice of European Jews. Exactly, that's why. So we can speak more freely and say what we do really think about different kind of things. Monika, so would you like to answer Ethan's question?
Yeah, one very important issue here well, the Jewish community in Poland is very it means extremely small, which in number it's not significant in any measures by, let's say, if we are looking into number of potential electoral votes or having much to say on general policy issues.
Yeah.
So from this perspective, it's good that the European Jews or Israeli Jews or Israelis or whoever, American Jews, are speaking about, let's say, situation in Poland in terms of possible prevention of anti-Semitism. It's of course another discussion, and a lot has to be done in terms of education, and we still have these voices, but not only in Poland, speaking against the Jews. If we look into what's going on in Germany with the extreme right-wing camp or extreme left-wing camp, which is extremely anti-Israeli. And we can also look into specific European countries that displayed a lot of, I would say, hatred towards Israel. And by proxy to Jews, because Israel is the Jewish state and somehow it gets all connected. The Jewish community in Poland is actually in good situation in terms that all churches and religious communities managed in 1997 to to have the legislation that is actually returning the properties that are used for the religious purposes back to those churches and religious communities.
Mhm.
So in this part of the addressing of the restitution problem, the churches were taken care of. And let's say the Jewish community got along on the wing of course, bigger churches that had dominant position, but it's also allowed the Jewish community in Poland to gain some specific properties that are actually the only source of income to this Jewish community. We have there are 9 Jewish communities in Poland, and the umbrella organization is the Union of Jewish Communities. And alongside with the cultural association, these 2 groups are representing the Polish jury, given that probably in 90% the same people are members of both. So that's the status.
So now at the end of our discussion, I would like to also talk about the current diplomatic situation. I mean, like 2 ambassadors, which are not really anymore ambassadors, or they are not in the countries they should be in. So what do you think? Like, how long the situation is going to last for? I mean, do you think that really Israel and the United States will push forward with their now I should find a good word, diplomatic word, because actually what actually is doing Israel and America right now? Are they like ruining their relations with the Polish government? What actually is happening right now, and how do you think how it's going to end? Ethan or Ethan, you want to now take a stand?
Yeah, okay. So first of all, this is just an opinion, and at least from my own analysis. So of course, I'm not the final word on this decision, but I believe that with any kind of problem, whether it be political or whether it be cultural or this or that, there has to be something which comes from more of a diplomatic or economic point of view, which helps restitute relations, right? I know this is a bit far-fetched, but after World War II, how did European countries get together? It was mainly before a political association like the European Union, they decided to have something economic and then foster relations through that form. So I believe if Israel and Poland, hopefully through the help of the United States or another superpower, are able to foster some kind of economic deal again or foster economic relations, we'll be able to set these things aside. And maybe there should also, besides that, there should also be some type of political engagement which comes first out of Israel, in a sense, because they have alienated a lot of Polish Jewry, which they hope to protect or they hope to represent with this whole diplomatic action that they've taken by calling it anti-Semitic, saying that it's unjustified, and so forth. So I would hope that maybe somebody in the foreign ministry would be able to hopefully readdress the Polish situation, because that is something that has happened in 2018 as well, with the whole banning of the name Polish death camp and so forth. What Netanyahu did back in the day when he was prime minister, actually went to Poland, and during those times actually kind of struck a deal, kind of met them halfway, which left relationships a bit less sour than they were before, but people were over time willing to forget the issue, the main controversy, and focus more on other type of relations, such as economic and such as political inside the European Union.
I would like to second Ethan's opinion, and first of all, the ambassadors must go back to their positions. And there must be some sort of discussion between the countries on the diplomatic level, and this discussion might take a long time, but it must start on proper level and immediately, because this is what the At least Polish society wants that, and also Israeli society wants that, as far as I know, and as far as I'm observing the practical connections on many levels. And definitely the issue with 2018 and signing the joint statement by Prime Ministers Netanyahu and Morawiecki was a very good step to calm down the situation, and it also followed with some steps taken in the legislative, being that some parts of that questionable law of 2018 were deleted. So we hope it might also lead to this process and changing a little bit of the recent change to the administrative code. My expectation would be to let those cases which had already been started to be able to be finalized in accordance with within the legal situation that we have until now.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Monika. We have like two guests here. Now it's the time to ask the questions. Do we have some questions from the guests which are on
Yeah,
Zoom?
Eva asked why Poland and Polish people seem to be picked on, but I feel
Okay.
helpless to this question.
Maybe, excuse me, Mr. Eva, if Mrs. Eva, if you're willing to elaborate a bit on the question, that would also help us give a bit more of a detailed answer.
Yes, please.
Yes,
Eva,
I can.
unmute
So
yourself.
I am in the car, so that's why I wasn't on camera and you couldn't hear me. But you know, like I was born in Poland and I live in Australia, so that's quite far away, and that's why it's dark. As you can see, it's 9 p.m. But look, I have some understanding of the Polish-Jewish situation, I guess. But you know, people are more than happy to go and live in Berlin and you know, walk the streets of Vienna, and you know, they seem to be, well, I'm generalizing here, by the way, but they seem to be a bit more forgiving towards other nationalities than Poles. So I wonder whether it's some sort of like a love-hate relationship, or there's something deeper than that, where you know, Jewish people just feel very disappointed that their neighbors didn't protect them, or like, I don't know, maybe we need a psychologist to explain it, but I'm just wondering if any of you had any reflections as to why that is, that Poles are given such a hard time.
If you don't mind me answering first, then hopefully Monika, you can also provide. So first of all, it's nice to see you in the car. Please drive safe afterwards. Just make sure.
Yep. Pulled over,
Right.
yeah.
So I think that there's a general bias as well, and I don't think it's Poland specifically, but whole of Eastern Europe as a whole, right? I would say that there's this real understanding of us in the West, wherever they may be, that things have been left kind of sour, and that we've seen this democratic backsliding, especially with Poland in general, you know, whether it be with anti-LGBTQ laws or with the abortion and so forth, that things have not been going well in Poland for the last few years. And I feel like as well, when you address this question in Berlin, which is in a sense, or at least from a perception, kind of more accepting towards its past than Poland, then obviously it would make sense that Polish people or the Polish state gets a bit less of a good view. And with anything, like whenever we talk about a state's actions, unfortunately, those actions are also reflected on the citizens of that country, in a sense. And I can also tell you a bit of a personal story, that when we go on a March to the Living tour, which is basically going to Poland and kind of seeing the camps and everything, there have been situations, of course, where you only get to see those camps